The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive with Dr. Rebecca Risk. Do you ever feel that even though nothing seems seriously wrong and you pass all the medical tests, that you still feel that your health, pain, and fatigue are completely out of control? It doesn't have to be that way. Listen to the tips and suggestions given on our program today and take back control of your health. Now, here is Dr. Rebecca Risk.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Falling Through the Cracks. Today, we're talking with Kathleen Dean Moore. She is an environmental philosopher, climate activist, and writer, the author or co-editor of a dozen books that celebrate and defend the beautiful, reeling world. We're discussing her most recent book, Great Tide Rising, Toward Clarity and Moral Courage in a Time of Planetary Change. Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So what got you involved in writing and speaking about climate change?
Well, for years, I was a nature writer, and I would write stories about my excursions into wild and wet places, and it was such a celebration, and it was such a joyous thing. But gradually it dawned on me that as I was celebrating these small lives, they were disappearing as I wrote. And I was feeling very uneasy about that, and then I went to a conference, and I heard Gus Speth from Yale say, the only thing we have to do to make sure that we leave a ruined world for our children and our grandchildren is to continue doing exactly what we are doing now. I thought, our children and our grandchildren, ruined world. I thought, my Zoe, my little 10-year-old granddaughter over in Vancouver, a ruined world, and suddenly I thought, that's it. It's over. The only thing I'm going to do now with my professional and writing life is to try to save a world for these little children.
So I know in your book you have a beautiful story about starfish, and I think it was your grandson. Can you share that story with us?
Oh, I'd be pleased. This is from the first chapter, which is called At Low Tide, Watching the World Go Away. We're wading in rubber boots at the rim of the sea, my grandson and I. Behind us is a limestone ledge that shelters green anemones and limpets. It's a silver day in Alaska, shining, shivering seas, and clouds so low you feel you could bump your head. My grandson leans over to poke a graying starfish. This one is soft. That means it's sick. This child is 3 years old, and already he knows the signs of starfish wasting syndrome. He gives the sea star a last poke with his forefinger and stands to gaze around the cove. His mom is around here someplace, he says, wrinkling his brow and not finding her. He's sick. He needs a mom. I think that is undoubtedly true. Just last year, this cove was full of sea stars. We saw them in every damp crevice, heaps of them. This year, we come across only 2 or 3 stars here and there splayed on the shingle. These that remain are wasting away too, a hideous process. Lesions form. The tissues around them decay, so the starfish flattens and falls apart. An arm may crawl away, but soon it too turns to mush. Around our boots, torn arms and the wispy scraps of wasted sea stars float on the incoming tide. It's a catastrophe among many on a planet growing sour and hot, and I am afraid for this small child. If only there were a mom around here who could shelter the young lives and comfort us all. But what would such a mother do? A statement of scientific consensus led by Stanford scientists has badly shaken me. Unless all nations take immediate action, by the time today's children are middle-aged, the life support systems of the earth will be irretrievably damaged. I am holding the hand of a small child in a yellow raincoat and orange bib overalls. His little boots have long ago filled with water. His hair is damp and smells of salt. And I am staring at my boots and thinking of what it could possibly mean to this child to live on a planet whose life-supporting mechanisms have frayed and fallen apart.
Thank you for sharing that. That was having read your book yesterday, your book is beautiful, and I think that's was a great way to present such a story that people aren't wanting to talk about, or that we're fighting about, which baffles me. That this is happening, and that a lot of people are actually okay with it happening.
Well, it's an astonishment, isn't it? And I'm not sure people are okay with it happening as much as they're simply not able to bring themselves to understand what's happening. It's a gargantuan monster to contemplate.
So, I know this could probably take the whole show, so we'll try to keep this very brief, but can you explain to us what actually is happening, what's climate change, and what's going on?
Yeah, there's always climate change. The Earth over millennia has gradually up and down changed its temperature, but those natural processes are being absolutely overwhelmed by this rapid human change that we're imposing on the world. And I think people understand the physics of it, that the sun's rays beat down on the Earth and then they bounce off. And generally, they are radiated at a rate that makes the life on Earth sustainable. But now with carbon dioxide and methane and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere in such huge quantities, the result of all of our burning of fossil fuels and other forces, those rays are getting captured as they leave the atmosphere, and then they're being radiated back out. So the Earth is heating, and the heating of the Earth is uneven, and that, of course, causes wild variations in the way the winds move and the oceans move. And so we have what we are now not so much calling climate change, but climate chaos and unpredictable changes in the way the weather works.
Climate chaos is definitely a good way to put it. That's how it feels. I mean, it's almost Christmas, and it has been 10 degrees Celsius where I live. Usually it's about minus 20 degrees Celsius, and with snow. And we haven't had snow yet. We're supposed to today, but it's very late. And, that's not the norm for where we are. I mean, I'm in the mountains, and it's high up and cold, and it's supposed to be cold. And then in the summer, we're having, these heat waves that we've never had before. And it's definitely palpable. We've been talking about it for years, but now you can see the changes happening.
Yeah, it's true. We thought, these are changes that are going to happen to our children and our grandchildren. And we look around and they're coming at us far faster than anyone predicted. I live in Oregon, and it isn't raining. It hasn't rained for weeks. And in Southern California, in the middle of winter, they will have forest fires at Christmas time. It's terrifying, and I think about the Arctic ice, which is of course relevant to where you live, and the great melting that is occurring there, and the predictions that it will not be a frozen area for millennia ever again.
So what is it exactly that we are doing as humans that's contributing to this?
Everything, right?
What aren't we doing, I guess? But
right.
What are we doing first?
I'm sitting here kind of stunned. Okay, we have created, for a variety of reasons we can go into, a culture that is deeply unsustainable. My lifestyle, if it were to be sustained by everybody, would require 7 Earths, not just 1, but 7. So we're overshooting the capacity of the Earth to support us. We are emitting greenhouse gases at a rate far beyond the ability of the atmosphere to disperse them, and the resulting, of course, has to do with climate change. So it's the burning up, how we move ourselves, how we feed ourselves, how we educate ourselves. It requires something to be burning up to create the electricity or the movement. And that, of course, has consequences. We are transforming all the little lives on the earth into human biomass. And at any rate, I could go on this way too, but you've got me into the narrative of the great unraveling, and I don't like to live there, but I am very, very frightened by what we're doing. It can't continue.
I agree we can't continue, and I was brought up being very aware of the planet. Even before, we didn't know how it was affecting our health. We just knew it was affecting our planet. And my mom is a huge environmental activist, and she chose to retire, and she built a straw bale house, and they only have solar energy, and they have a well. But she had to actually save up to have that lifestyle, which was really sad, right? Like, she had to retire to get that back, or to get that. And so that was her dream and her retirement. So now they have this house, and they're sustainable, and they grow their own food, and they have their own chickens. Not even acceptable. Well, it's acceptable, but it's even in the where they live. Half the people think that they're a little bit off the wall, because why wouldn't you want things to be easier, because we have that available to us. But she wanted to reduce her carbon footprint and make a huge impact in her, the rest of her life. And what is sad to me is that she had to save and plan that for years to be able to do that.
Yes, and more power to her, because she's pushing back against very, very powerful forces that quite deliberately are making it hard for us to live our lives in alternative ways. I would love not to drive my car. I would love not to fly. But for decades, the fossil fuel industry has been killing programs that would have provided alternative ways to get around: electric cars, trains, and so forth. I would love to be able to eat organic food that's raised right here in my backyard, which is one of the most fertile places on earth. But the industrialized agriculture has made that very difficult with regulations and subsidies and so forth. So it's no accident that it's hard for us to live lives that we believe in. Our lives are designed by forces that would have us use fossil fuels.
Which is sad, because I think it should be encouraged that we all have solar panels, and I know there are other countries that do that. I don't think that that's so common in North America. Definitely not in Canada. Definitely not where I live. I'm in the middle of oil and gas central. So, if we're not supporting our industry, then it's not acceptable. So those I don't think I know anybody that has a solar panel here.
Even though you have abundant solar power, I mean, you have sunshine. Yeah.
We have a lot of sun here. Yeah. So one thing I found interesting in your book, and I actually had never thought of this before, but that climate change is a violation of human rights. I've never heard that spoken of that way before. And that really hit home to me. I found that very powerful. Can you just talk on that a little bit?
Yes, I can. It seems to me that the way that climate change is driving people from their homes, driving them away from their livelihoods, threatening their water and their air and their health, it's going to be the greatest violation of human rights this world has ever seen. And it's hard to know where to start. But we could start, for example, with the right to life. And the ways that our lives are going to be affected by this pollution from fossil fuel industry. I was just looking online for some of the health effects, and the list, even without going into detail, is very revealing. What are some of the things that are going to affect our ability to exercise our inalienable, supposedly, right to life? Well, temperatures that are related to the death and illness of people, particularly the elderly and children, air quality impacts, extreme weather events. My own brother-in-law has been totally wiped out by hurricanes. He's lost 40 pounds because he can't get food down in the islands where he lives. Vector-borne diseases, the mosquitoes, the other kinds of things that carry diseases, water-related diseases as the floods come through our cities and right into our supposed filtration systems, food safety, and then mental health and well-being. You start thinking about all these effects on our right to life, and you don't even need to go down the list to other kinds of rights that we have. Liberty? What is liberty when your fields are flooded? What is the right of self-determination or the right of a livelihood when drought takes away your farm? The right to the pursuit of happiness when you're a refugee fleeing from these forces into areas that are already crowded and that don't really want you, the insecurity that creates, the dangers. as I say, we're talking about massive violation of human rights, not only by the state actors, but by corporate actors as well.
I want to talk about this more. You brought up a lot of topics that I think I want to dive into, but we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back shortly. But we're talking today with Kathleen Dean Moore, and we're discussing her book, Great Tide Rising. We'll be back.
Think you've seen everything there is to see in online television? Let us surprise you. Visit voiceamerica.tv today for sports, health, business, and more on demand 24/7.
Have you figured out what to attract in your life in order to make it successful? There are those who can and those who can learn. Your intensified energy gives you willpower to move the bar forward and be happy. Happy people spread their energy throughout their lives, and once they figure it out, go on to be successful at nearly everything they set their mind to. Join host Ellen Morano and her panel of guest experts and co-hosts on Generate Massive Energy for a Fulfilling Life, Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Do you find yourself caring for people in multiple generations? Are you exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed? Instead of spending hours searching for resources and information, Dr. Merrill and her guests will provide you with practical, everyday information and solutions to help make your life easier. Tune into Caught Between Generations, Thursdays at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. Relationship issues? Anxious? Parenting challenges? No more. Learn how to live your best life. Tune into Straight Talk with top psychotherapist, relationship, and anxiety expert Sandra Reish. In this program, you'll learn how to transform your challenges into effective solutions, whether it's relationships, parenting, anxiety issues, or other life traps that you struggle with. Sandra will show you how to change them and how to live the life of your dreams. Listen every Thursday afternoon at 6 p.m. Eastern Time and 3 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Kathleen Dean Moore, and we're discussing her book, Great Tide Rising. So, Kathleen, before the break, we talked about this being a violation of human rights, and you brought up a lot of really good topics. And the reason why I chose to do the show when I reached out to you, and I know you were a little surprised at first because you saw this was a health show, but on a daily basis, I'm dealing with health problems that are affected by environmental change. My own health was affected by it in several ways. One, I have chronic Lyme, which is under control, but the epidemic of Lyme is more of an issue because of global warming, and the ticks are moving because places are warmer for them. So it's becoming, it's everywhere, instead of just in certain areas. There's also the pollution that, especially where I live, people are always surprised when I tell them that our air in Calgary is rated a D for air quality, because we can see the mountains. They're an hour away. People feel like, because everybody in this city is so active outside, they feel like we're, in tune with nature. But in fact, we're a very large city with a lot of pollution, and we're very behind in making the changes that need to be made. And, that's a conversation. Those are conversations I have every day, and people aren't realizing. And there's so much more. I mean, when we're talking about the quality of food that people are eating has also changed. And that's the same mentality of why people aren't making the changes to global warming, is we should be able to get away with processed food, and that should be okay. And we're I feel like we're going down this rabbit hole, and it's going to be very difficult for us, even though we're already making those changes, to come out of it.
You make really good points here on the West Coast, up in Oregon and down in California. It was simply impossible. There was nowhere to go to escape the smoke from the forest fires. To the coast, you couldn't. To the mountains, you couldn't. There were fires everywhere. And you stay in your home. How are you going to filter the air in your home? So the question I would ask is, who has the right to do this to us? Not as an accident, not as an unintended or unknowing consequence, but in full knowledge that this is the effect of the industry on people's health. Who has that right, and who gave them that right? But the other point I would make is that it's easy when we're so close to the industry, in such close proximity, to forget that we are so close to another way of life. You know, we are so close. Joanna Macy says that we can choose our frameworks for thinking about this. I mean, there's the business as usual framework of the industries that say, yeah, you know, everything's going to be fine, and that the market forces, the invisible hand of greed will save us. And then there's the narrative unraveling, where I have been so long, the narrative of unraveling, that things fall apart, the center will not hold. We are going, as you say, down this rabbit hole. But then there's the third frame that we can choose to live in, and that's where I'm starting to put my time, and that is the narrative of the Great Transformation. And when you look around the world, there are so many projects, there are so many people getting up every morning, putting on their shoes if they have them, and going to do the good work of the world. There's so many new ideas and so many ways of doing it. And the thing is, they all make sense. They make economic sense, they make moral sense, they make medical sense. I think we're really close to making that transformation.
So one thing, you used a phrase, the growing industry of overlooking. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it is on so many different levels and different dimensions. On the most basic level, I think it has to do with the way in which our government presumably requires certain kinds of studies to take place before they will permit a pipeline or a sludge pond or something. And there's a growing industry of consultants and analysts who are very willing to be paid to not find any problems. So you hire someone to go look for salmon at the site of an LNG, liquid natural gas plant, and I don't see any salmon. Do you see any salmon? I see no problems with this. So there's that, but there's this far larger culture of overlooking, and that is the most scary. That if you look at people who are very, very concerned about climate change, what percent of us is that? It's 71% now who really are caring about climate change in the United States. You ask them how often do they say the words climate change in the last 2 weeks, and they say it not once. There's this terrible silencing around climate change and the overlooking, the culture, the industry of overlooking. We're comfortable. Don't bother us.
So why do you think that is? Is there a taboo against talking about it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there are many, many causes. But one of the causes, I think, in my own friends, with my own neighbors, they're very reluctant to talk to me about climate change or listen to me, which they often are required to do. I think it's partly because of what Lewis Mumford calls the magnificent bribe. We have accepted the terms of a bribe. We can have anything we want. We can have imported pineapples and Ecuadorian roses. We can have mega homes and mega cars. We can have instant gratification, 1 or 2 day delivery, overnight delivery of anything we want in the world, on the condition that we never ask what it really costs. And we never look into all the destruction and deaths that went into the making of that, or we don't look into the future to see what the results of those decisions might be. And so here we are, caught in this bribe. So if people want to talk about climate change, really what they're talking about the choices I've made in my life and the choices I've allowed to be made in my name. So it's a very uncomfortable discourse.
That's it just reminded me of my own grocery shopping. I, for years, have ordered online but it's from an organic grocery delivery place, and it actually, I mean, they're in the area anyway. I think it saves gas, even though they're delivering, because I'm not going to the store. And they tell me how far my produce and everything has traveled. And so when I'm done my shopping, I get a tally of how far my groceries have traveled to get to me. It's also all organic, which is very important to me. But I think, if we go to a regular grocery store, we don't know what's happened to our food. We don't know where it's come from, and we don't have that awareness of its history, which is part of this, right? Is I want to know where things have come from and what's happened. But I think that's also part of how I was raised, which a lot of people don't even think about.
Yeah, it's tricky. On the one hand, we really are called to live lives we believe in. We really are called to make choices that are healthy not only for us, but also for the earth and all the earth's children. We are morally obliged to do that. On the other hand, I don't think that individual choices are going to solve this problem. I think that's going to take systematic change at a far greater level. And so even as we are choosing between the green bell pepper that was raised a mile away and the pineapple that was raised in South America, even as we're making that choice, I think we're called also to join together with other people to really express the moral imperative, the moral urgency of action. So it's one thing to choose carefully in the grocery store. It's quite another to stand outside the grocery store and hand people a pamphlet asking them to insist that the grocery store point out or list or put a sign up that shows the origin of all the food. Or to stand in front of the other kind of grocery store and insist that they not sell poisons that would kill plants and animals and insects in the same place they're selling food. So I think the people who care, I think it's time now to notch it up and to think not only in terms of our own actions, conscientious actions, which are absolutely essential, but also to think in terms of our public action.
So you mentioned a moral obligation, which I don't think a lot of people think about in relationship to this. So can you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, people think of climate change as a scientific issue and a technological issue, and it is. And they think of it as an economic issue. It absolutely is. It's a national security issue, all these things. But I think that fundamentally it's a moral problem, and it calls for a moral response. In what way is climate change a catastrophically immoral set of circumstances? I did a book a couple years ago where I wrote to 100 of the world's moral leaders, people like Thich Nhat Hanh and Desmond Tutu and Chilawat Cloutier, the head of the Inuit Circumpolar Council up in your area, and asked them this question: do we have a moral obligation to leave a world as rich in possibilities as the world that was left to us? Got back these beautiful responses in 2,000 words or less, put them together in a book called Moral Ground. And what it came down to, I think, is this. They listed reasons that we were able to categorize into 13, but the ones that spoke most strongly are 4. That climate change is a violation, as we already said, of human rights. It's also a violation of justice. The people who are reaping the benefits, so-called, of the profligate use of fossil fuels are not the ones who are bearing the costs. And it's the most innocent among us, the most silent, the future generations, the plants and animals, the children, the economically marginalized who are bearing these costs. Third, I think it's a failure of reverence, that this earth that has been left to us by our forebears, by evolution, is the most extraordinary, amazing, and I would say sacred place, and we are grinding it up and using it to feed ourselves in every possible way. But most important, I think, is the 4th reason, and that is that climate change is a betrayal of the children. We held them in our arms. We promised them. We said, we would do anything for you. We would give you the world. And we're utterly betraying our promise to them. It's a betrayal. as I say. And so yes, this is an economic thing, and it calls for scientific and technological changes, absolutely. But it also is a moral crisis such as we have never seen.
Well, it sounds like it, and as you said, I think a lot of people don't think about it this way. It's, we all recycle and do those things, but the moral obligation makes it different, looking at it that way, that we do have this obligation to do the right thing, and the right thing is to protect our planet.
Yeah, we're used to thinking of ethics as a scolding kind of thing, shake your fist at people, shake your finger at people. The ethics of prohibition, don't do that, don't buy this. But what if we thought about ethics as an ethics of affirmation? What do you love too much to lose? What do you believe is more valuable than anything else in your life? And then what are you going to do to protect what you value so much? What are you going to do to save what you love? And when people come together, I think, around what they love and around what they value and design their lives in that way, then I think that we have a far more affirmative, a far more joyous, and a far more effective way of thinking about our obligations.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And we're going to take a quick break. We're talking today with Kathleen Dean Moore. She is the author of Great Tide Rising. We'll be back shortly.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
Can grief be good for you? Absolutely. It gets your attention, helping you evaluate your choices and relationships. Your losses define who you are. Tune in each week for Good Grief with host Cheryl Jones. Our show features those who have made incredible transformations by grieving their losses. You'll learn how to find your courage and strength. You'll discover the important things in your life and how to let go of things that are less important. Good Grief airs live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Eastern on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Have you heard of nutritional balancing? Your body's biochemistry affects the mental, physical, and emotional aspects of your life. Many of the diseases we face are related to an imbalance of the mind, body, and spirit. Find out how to get everything back in line when you tune in to Healing Treasures of Wisdom with host Daniel Solomon. Learn how to heal yourself and your family every week. Listen Thursday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel.
Explore the power of natural healing with Howard Strauss. Join us each week for an informative program that'll help you learn effective healing methods using natural remedies. Howard's guests include top researchers, authors, and experts who will share their views on a variety of natural products and healing methods that really work. Tune in to The Power of Natural Healing with Howard Strauss, Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel.
Opinions, options, answers. You're listening to Voice America Health and Wellness.
You are listening to Falling Through the Cracks with your host, Dr. Rebecca Risk. To reach the program today, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. Again, that's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email directly to Dr. Risk. The email address is anantacalgary@gmail.com. Now, back to Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Kathleen Dean Moore. She's the author of Great Tide Rising, Toward Clarity and Moral Courage in a Time of Planetary Change. So, Kathleen, there's a lot of people who say that global warming is, there's nothing that we can do about it, or it's a hoax. What do you say to people like that?
Well, what do I say to people who say it's a hoax? Well, that's very different. That has I have changed what I said. Before, maybe like about 4 years before, I didn't say anything to them. I figured they would learn. I figured that the more that they were exposed to the truth, that they would come around. And that I also realized that the number of people who thought that global warming was a hoax was approximately the same as the number of people who think that Elvis Presley is still alive. And I didn't think it was a force to be reckoned with. That turned out to be a serious mistake. Now, obviously, climate denial has become a badge of identity. It's become who people are. It's not about evidence. It's not about values. It's about identifying with a set of people who are angry, not at climate change, not at the fossil fuel industry, but it's something else that I can't quite identify. So now when I speak to them, which I have a very hard time finding occasion to do, by the way, when I go to my in-laws in Ohio, all of the people who are climate deniers, they have already agreed among themselves before I arrive that they will not talk about climate change. But when I talk about it, I talk about what they really care about. I talk about clean water. I talk about healthy children. I talk about all those values that we have in common. And then I don't really take that very much farther right away. You know, here's what we share, here's what we love. We want good food, we want clean water. And it's only later that we start thinking together about how we might achieve those. Could we? And we're still not talking about climate change. We're still not talking about fossil fuels, but we are talking about incremental changes we could make. Do they need to spray poisons on that field next to you? Do you really need to have this kind of bird sanctuary destroyed by the next Kmart, that kind of thing? So we don't talk about climate change, but we talk about the changes that climate action would bring about.
But, there are some people that say, well, those birds they'll just go somewhere else. So it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
Then they're running out of places to go.
That is really true. We could certainly start talking about the silencing and the silences and the extinction.
Yeah.
Daniel Quinn, the author of Ishmael, had this metaphor. He said, we're like people who live on the 100th floor of a penthouse, a lovely penthouse, and every day we send workers down to the foundation to remove bricks from the foundation and bring them up into the penthouse to make it more lavish and more lovely. He said, we might be able to do that for 30 years or even 100 years, but much longer than that, and we will have created channels of emptiness in the foundation of our lives, and the whole edifice will collapse, and nothing will save us, not even the lavishness of our lives. So, when you think about extinction, when you think about how, 40% now of the plants and animals on the earth have vanished since 1970. I was alive in 1970. Since in my lifetime, that percentage of the plants and animals has disappeared. 78% of the freshwater species have disappeared. 39% of marine wildlife. 39% of terrestrial wildlife. And of course, it's worse in the developing countries where we're exporting our destruction. So this silencing of the earth, this decimation of Earth's lovely, lovely creatures, is a problem we absolutely have to address.
Well, I didn't realize that it was so high, like 40%. And in my lifetime is pretty significant. It's a short period of time in the span of evolution that this has happened, and knowing that this is something that we've done, and I know that we have some urgency on this, but it feels like it's still going really slowly.
Compare it, for example, to the 80% of all species that were wiped out when an asteroid hit the Earth and killed most of the dinosaurs and other things. That was an 80% extinction. Now we already have 78% of freshwater species, and we are approaching that. We are having the impact of an asteroid. It's hard to know because you can't see absence. It's hard to hear because you can't hear silence. But it is happening around us at a tremendous rate.
That's pretty crazy. So what can people do to make changes?
Yeah, so there are a lot of people who don't think they can do anything. And I'm very concerned about them. They're the climate deniers of the first order who don't think it's real. But then far more dangerous are the climate deniers of the second order who think that these changes are happening, but there's nothing they can do. And we have to address that first of all. there's a paralysis in blind hope. We say, well, everything's going to be fine, don't worry, business will take care of it. And so there's this abdication of moral responsibility. I don't have to do anything. But there's a similar abdication when you say everything is falling apart and there's nothing I can do, because then you don't have to do anything either. So hope or despair in their extremes are paralyzing. But it's a false dilemma. Those are not our only alternatives, because in the center is this middle ground, and call it integrity, where you live a life that you believe in, where you match your acts to your beliefs and your values. And there's a great freeing of that, because you do what's right because you think it's right. You act lovingly toward the earth because you love it. You live simply because you don't believe in taking more than your fair share. And so there's this liberation. It may not be that I can save the world. It may not be that I can have any impact, but I can live a life that I believe in. And then there's this funny paradox that happens when we turn away from this easy optimism, or we turn away from this easy despair, and we live this life that we believe in. There's a kind of courage that comes, and there's a kind of exhilaration. We can join together, like we did in the Great Climate March. We can join together in this conviction that we are doing what we believe is right. So let's take that as a first step, to allow us to escape from despair and to allow ourselves to escape from easy optimism.
So I know some people do, as you said, they deny that action can do anything. What are your comments to that?
Okay, oftentimes people say, what can one person do? Well, my answer to that is stop being one person. Join up with your friends. Join up with a list. Get on a listserv where they will call you to join up with them, and in certain kinds of actions, and ramp up your miserable private efforts to live sustainably, and ramp them up to another level so that you are joining up with other people. And there are 3 kinds of work that need to be done. Again, quoting Joanna Macy. And they all need to be done, and they all need to be done now. The first one is stop the harm. Stop the harm. Stop the next pipeline. Stop the next dredging pond. Stop the next incursion onto indigenous land. Stop the next poisoning. And we can do that by getting in the way, making it expensive, making it uncertain, making it economically perilous to do the wrong thing. It may be standing on a railroad track in front of an oil train. It may be suing for the poisoning of the water. It may be joining up with indigenous people to protect their treaty rights. But it may be bringing your choir to stand in the forest that's about to be clear-cut. It may be pamphling at the grocery store. You see, that's the point. Stop the harm. Get in the way. Make it hard. The second thing is to find a better way. And here is where there's this ballooning of things that are happening all around the world. Better ideas. There's a better way to get to work. There's a better kind of energy. There's a better kind of food. Let's find it. Let's make it easy. So this is this effort of imagination. Some people say that if we do lose the world, it will be because of a failure of the imagination. And writers tell one another, do the hard thing. It's much easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism, but give it a try. Imagine a better life. And so writers are calling on each other to do this work of the imagination. And then the third thing Joanna says is reimagine who you are in relation to the natural world. We're not these comic book superheroes who are in charge of the earth. We can't destroy our habitats without destroying ourselves. We are deeply, beautifully, creatively, resiliently joined to the rest of the natural creation. And let us accept that and embrace it and be grateful for it.
Well, that's beautiful. Not everybody can do what my mom did by saving up for 20 years and retiring in the country to live off the land. But to know that there's something that we can do in the community that we're in to be able to make those changes, to have, things move forward and to stop or slow down what's happening. I think that's encouraging to hear that. As you said, people are in despair, and to know that we can do something, I think, is very helpful.
You know, I was at a meeting of the, I guess it was a Society of Environmental Journalists, and one of the speakers was a representative of the American Petroleum Institute, and he was explaining away the Deep Horizon oil spill. And after it was over, I walked out with him, we were walking along this icy trail, and I decided to start a conversation. So I said, "Do you have children?" And you know where I was headed with that. And he did too. And he turned to me, all 6'3" of them or something like that, big broad shoulders, big black overcoat, bald, shaved head. And he turned to me and he raised his finger into my face and he says, "Don't you ever, 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 ever underestimate the power of the fossil fuel industry." And at that point, I was laughing inside because I knew I was being bullied. And I knew that these times of transformation are times of bullying, but the ferocity of his response made me understand the fragility of his industry. They are poised right at the intersection of the old way of living and the new way of living. And when they will go fast. We will find a better way. We will find their fragility, the economic fragility. Their margins are so slender. Their physical fragility, they are extended in these delicate pipelines that extend all across the continent. And their moral fragility is absolutely stunning. I believe that right comes out in the end. And I don't believe him when he talks about the great powers, even though I understand what they're doing to us, and I understand how they've taken control of the United States government, and I understand how they determine how we live our lives. I think that there is, as I say in my book, a great tide rising, and it's a tide of outrage, and it's a tide of strength and confidence, and it's a tide of imagination. So I think we are living at the most exciting time in history, when this crisis is creating opportunities now for us to build the lives that we want.
You know, there in pretty much every show that I've ever done, there's this awareness to me that there's a train of thought or something that happens where we can't see past ourselves. Either we're dealing with addiction or we're dealing with this issue, just as this man said to you, the denial that he's in of the destruction he's doing. This has come up over and over and over, so much so that I actually did a show with somebody to explain to me why this was there. And, why human nature is to not see what's so obvious in front of us. And I think it happens in other areas, and I think it's happening here. This man was bullying you, not to even remind him. He didn't want to be reminded about his moral duty. He wanted to make his money and do what he was doing and not be aware, and to keep his blinders up so he could look straight ahead and not see what he was doing.
Yeah, that's right. In regard to your comment about that it's how expensive it was for your mother to do what she has done, I just want to point out that there are actions that are hugely impactful that everyone can do that will save us money. It's not that we have to buy organic sausages. We can stop eating meat. Raising livestock accounts for 15% of the global greenhouse gases. 15%. So what if we stopped eating meat? That would save us a lot of money. And don't just buy a bike. I know that is expensive, or a Tesla, or whatever hybrid car. Stop international travel. And especially this eco-travel, where people go to admire these beautiful ecosystems that are disappearing partly because of their eco-travel. Every transatlantic flight melts for all time a chunk of Arctic ice that's equivalent to a refrigerator. So there are things that we can refuse to do. We can refuse to make ourselves, to let ourselves be made into foot soldiers in this war against the earth by turning our backs on some of these things. And then the things that we can do: can you push a button? Can you click I stand with you? Can you show up at the corner with a sign? These take nothing more than courage and the determination to do what's right.
I agree with you. And I think this is a great topic to start 2018, because I think it's, this is where we've just come out of a time of gluttony, whether that was the food that we ate, the overindulgence in presents, the overindulgence in general, and to also be aware that there's other things that were affected with all of that as well. And if we're going to, go on a diet and take care of ourselves, we should also take care of our mother and make sure that she's okay with everything that we're doing, as well as our own bodies.
That's a very beautiful thought. We're in this time when so many women in particular are calling out the bullies and saying, I have been bullied, and comes another one who says, me too, me too. Well, Did you see the cartoon that showed a picture of the earth, and there's a balloon coming out from her mouth, and she says, #me too. And I think that's right. We are a bullying culture, and it's the earth that's taking the brunt. Yeah, and it's that same mentality where somehow we don't see what's around us, which I think is a human nature when we're sick, whether it's a mental or physical illness. I think we're so hurt and so sick and so selfish in ourselves because of that we can't see outside of that. But if we just open our eyes a little bit and look around, I think that can also change how we feel about ourselves, because to get in touch with nature helps us feel better. But if nature is not going to be there for very much longer, we're going to lose that. And I think that, this is part of why there's so much depression and all of these new illnesses that are increasing, and everybody is just not feeling well. I think we're losing touch with what's really, really important. I think you're right. I think there's great healing power in the natural world, and now it's time for us to give back that gift and turn our caring towards the healing of the natural world. And I can't think of any more joyous work than that. And healthy work, to be out there planting trees, to be out there protesting the poisoning of the river, to be out there, raising your own vegetables. I hope you can in Calgary, can you? Yes, if we have a backyard. Okay. Yeah. Right. I have a condo, so only my little deck, but yeah. Yeah, that's great. So yeah, we I think need to encounter our own despair at the situation we are in, and consumerism is not the answer. When we feel that something's lacking in our lives, we oftentimes go to the mall. We turn towards things. The commodification of caring, the way that the environmental movement has been transformed into a click here and donate $10 to save the world farce, instead of everyone out there doing it, doing their best. The way that we shop and give gifts, I think it just makes us sadder. And you're right. I think that to find the true sources of our solace, we'll have to go outside. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're trying to fill a void with all of this that can't be filled in the way that we're doing it. So is there any way, now one thing, I want people to know how beautiful your book is. And, it takes this topic that can be very scientific, and your stories in there are beautiful. And the way that you put it out is gorgeous. So, and we've touched on some of what's in there, but your book is very, very different from this conversation that we've had as well. So is there any way that people can get a hold of your book, or you, if they have any more questions? The book is a mixture of weaving, an intentional weaving of stories like the one I began with, and comments as we have progressed. I do believe that it's important to reach people's hearts in a way. I want to open people's hearts without breaking them, and I think that the vehicle for that is stories, and oftentimes stories about what we love, the children and the rivers. So that's probably more of what my book is about than this kind of ranting that I've been doing, and I apologize for that. So yes, this book is all over the place. You have a favorite local independent bookseller. You could go there and ask them to get it for you. You can, of course, you can get it online if that's your choice. Or you can go to my website, which is www.riverwalking.com, where you'll find all kinds of information about the book, including a study guide if people want to get together with people and read the book together and do a lot of things that are creative and energizing and uplifting and fun at the same time. So www.riverwalking.com.
Well, perfect. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. This was a great conversation, and I absolutely loved your book.
Thank you so much for saying so, and thank you for inviting me, Rebecca. I wish you well.
You too. And I want to thank everybody for listening. Today we were talking with Kathleen Dean Moore, and the book was Great Tide Rising. Just be sure to make today a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Falling Through the Cracks. Feel alive and thrive. Please join Dr. Rebecca Risk again next Monday at noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. We'll talk more next week.